here we go. The bad for the Gators outside the top 10. And that's the first thing people are going to look at. Just the basic of recruiting. Oh, if you're just a general follower of recruiting and you don't follow it day in and day out, and you don't, take it all in, the first thing people are going to look at is just the ranking. Florida's outside the top 10 using the 24/7 sports composite. So, okay. A lot of importance is put on the bump class and how far it can take you in a turnaround, and maybe even where it takes you in your career at a head coaching stop. So for right now, probably some patients are going to need to be involved now because of how this class played out. Outside the top 10, they are number 10 in on 3. So if you want to use that, by all means, go ahead. But outside the top 10, and I don't think a lot of people expected that. Now, I never expected top 5. I said it over and over again on this podcast. Was there a path there? Were we feeling good about ourselves a couple of weeks ago, and there may have been a path for Florida to get there? Yeah, and I would have been absolutely surprised given everything how it turned out. I was not to expect Florida and Billy Napier to come in and turn it around like that. And if they were not going to go the rogue booster crazy money, that was never going to happen. And I didn't see Florida doing that, so I didn't see a top 5 class. To ask to go over Bama and Ohio State and Georgia, of course, I didn't see it. So Miami did, and we know they went crazy in the NIL world, and we know what happened. The money world with this. Mario Cristobal is a good recruiter. Pair all that together, you see why they're in the top 3. I didn't see Florida taking that path. Now, top 10, I won't lie. I said, Florida's got to be there. So right outside the top 10, and look, that grouping is pretty close together. I mean, there's not a lot of separation when you look at Notre Dame's at number 9 with a score of 279. Tennessee 277 at number 10. Clemson 275. Florida at 272. So there's not a lot of separation when you look at overall score. And those teams grouped together, where from Notre Dame at 9 to Florida at 12. Not a lot of separation. And look, that's where the differences of those 5 stars come into play. With Florida not getting a 5-star, the 5 stars are weighted pretty heavy in the recruiting rankings. And 1 5-star probably shoots, I have to do some calculations, but firmly in the top 10. So outside the top 10, that's a lot of people are going to look at it and on the surface. Okay, that's bad. But the worst part about it is the next bullet point. 5th in the SEC. This is how difficult it is. This is why it's different than the Clemson build and building their way and taking time under Dabo Swinney. They only had to pass FSU at that point. And Dabo's early seasons, they had to only worry about South Carolina as an out-of-conference opponent. And he couldn't even beat South Carolina at that point when Steve Spurrier was there. And then they only really had to pass FSU in the recruiting rankings. The path is much easier. It's different in this conference. Florida's hovering around a top 10 class, but they're 5th in the SEC. 5th in the SEC. And we can't overlook throwing in Texas and Oklahoma in it. They're both above Florida. They're going to be in the conference soon. You have to throw them in it because these players that are in this class for Texas and Oklahoma, Florida will end up facing those teams, especially if the rumors are true in Texas and Oklahoma and the world of college football speeds up a little bit and they join the SEC in 2024. Those players in this class, Florida is going to face. So now you put 2 more teams in front of Florida, and now Florida's 7th in the conference. So overall, a good class. But in the SEC, you're behind a lot of your opponents. You're behind Georgia. And we don't even know what the new scheduling format is going to be like. So you're behind Alabama, you're behind Georgia, you're behind Texas, you're behind LSU, you're behind Oklahoma, and for this class, you're behind Tennessee. So that's the bad when you want to take a look at rankings. And yeah, hey, it's look, I know it's not an elite class. At the same time, it's not a terrible class. This is not one of those. Look, I think if Dan Mullen would have been the head coach in this NIL atmosphere that's out there in college football, man, I just think that would not set up well for that. I know a lot of people want to sit here and point, there's no difference whether as I said, the player average is much higher in this, and I do not think Dan Mullen would have been made for this NIL recruiting world. I think it could be worse. I'm not saying it's the best out there. No 5 stars, as I said as well. Look at the top of the class. No 5 stars for the Gators. You want 5 stars. There's 35 5 stars on the 24/7 Sports Composite, and not one of them's going to Florida. Cormani McLean in the state, not going to Florida. Maybe you're heading out of the state now instead of going to Miami. Francis Malagoa going to Miami. IMG guy, but if he's going to Miami, he could have easily went to Florida. Keon Keeley, Damon Wilson, Cedric Baxter, Desmond Ricks. We'll see what he does. But Hakeem Williams, Brandon Ennis, all 5 stars in the state of Florida, and none of them are going to Florida. That one's hard to swallow. Being that there's so many in the state of Florida, you couldn't get one of them. That's going to have to change. That's going to have to change for sure. Now, look, we look ahead, and I know I'm not going to try and do this too much because it's not a cop-out. There is the ability that we have seen in the 24 class. You got DJ Lagway, and if Miles Graham stays where he's at, he'll be a 5-star as well. So you could get him in the next class. But for this class of 23, and there were so many in-state, and look, some of them look friendly at times. Cormani McLean, Keon Keeley, Cedric Baxter, Desmond Ricks. Man, I would have thought Florida would have got one of them. Missing top Florida recruits. I just mentioned the 5 stars in the state. But you have to get all the way to Aiden Mazzell, the wide receiver, as the 21st ranked player in the state of Florida before you find a state of Florida recruit that went to the Gators. The 21st ranked player. The top 20 players in the state of Florida did not go to the University of Florida. Not one of them. Dijon Johnson, he's one spot behind Aiden Mazzell at 22. Eugene Wilson and Roderick Kearney are 28 and 29. Jakeem Jackson, 32. Cameron James at 39. Jordan Castell at 44. Sharif Denson at 46. So that gave Florida 8 of the top 50 in the state of Florida, but none in the top 20, as I said. If Miami ends up keeping Cormani McLean, they'll have the top 2 players in the state. Cormani McLean and Malangoa. Miami has 4 before you even get to Aiden Mazzell for the Gators. Now, I think that will change of course it will if McLean ends up leaving. So as we record this, that's how it stands. But here's the one that really hurts. Georgia has 6. 6 of the top players in the state of Florida. Now I went to the top 50. They could be adding a 7th. If they get Jordan Hall. So Georgia's still recruiting well in the state of Florida. Then that hurts too. Miami with all their changes going on, okay, and they're in the state. All right, you might can see that. But that was all in the top 50 there for the state of Florida. But Georgia has 6. Let me make sure. I want to go check that because I'm pretty sure that was 6 maybe before you get to Florida. And Mizell at 21. I took that note and I'm trying to figure it out now. So 1 for Georgia with Damon Wilson, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So 6 of the top 19, maybe 7 of the top 19 for Georgia in the state of Florida. That's got to change. And we've been saying that year after year after year here on Gators Breakdown when we take a look at these classes and where the top in-state guys are going. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of players in the state of Florida. You ain't getting all of them. But if Florida wants to be back on that elite stage, that is probably priority number 1. Getting top players and getting top state of Florida players. And lastly here, like I did for the good, we'll take a look at some positions I think Florida really missed on: defensive tackle, linebacker, offensive line, tight end. Defensive tackle, gonna, say Jordan Hall will decide tomorrow, just like Desmond Ricks is going to decide on Thursday. Looks to be a battle between Florida and Georgia. And I lean Georgia right now. Right up the road in Jacksonville, and a player maybe going to Athens. But then just down the road, Florida had 2 top flight targets right here. Jordan Hall up in Jacksonville, and then down the road in Orlando with John Walker. And he sticks with UCF. Commits to UCF early, back in the summer. Visits Florida countless times over the fall. And then sticks with UCF in the end. We know the issues Florida has had at defensive tackle. We know the help Florida needs at defensive tackle. And they couldn't get one of the top targets in the state. Both those guys in the state, one an hour and a half up the road, one an hour and a half down the road, and you couldn't get either one of them. For now, Will Norman, the only high school recruit Florida has as a defensive tackle, and he's a good player. Not taking anything away from Will Norman, he needed help. He needed a Jordan Hall beside him and or a Walker beside him. Linebacker. I'm going to stay here in Jacksonville. Grayson Pup Howard going to South Carolina. Had a good relationship with some Florida guys. But Mike Peterson comes over from South Carolina as a linebacker coach for Florida. Had an in there, but Howard had so many good relationships there in South Carolina already built that it was just really tough for Florida to overcome. But up the road in Jacksonville, and you couldn't get him. And then Malik Bryant there with Miami. Lewis Carter, another linebacker in the Tampa area. Guys that were in state, guys that were in close. And once again, not taking anything away from Jaden Robinson. I think he's a good player, but Florida needed more help at linebacker. Needed more than one, I can tell you that. But you had some good options. You had some high-level options between Howard, Bryant, and Lewis Carter. Couldn't get it done. And then offensive line for the Gators, bringing in 3, possibly 4 down the road. Get into that in just a second. The crown jewel, Roderick Kearney, 118th ranked player in the country in Orange Park, Florida. 5th ranked interior offensive lineman. Great pickup there for the Gators. You flipped him from Florida State. So not only did you help your team, but helped your team, hurt FSU at the same time. But there were so many ways to get, so many angles to get to more of the better talent among the offensive linemen. Now, you did get into IMG and you went and got Najee Harris back in the spring. Another interior offensive lineman for the Gators, probably going to be that center in the group. 437th ranked player from IMG. Najee Harris, a Gator. Bryce Lovett, 3-star. Najee Harris is a 3-star. Bryce Lovett's a 3-star. Lovett, 630th. So, just not top-level talent. Missed out Lucas Simmons. He's going to FSU. Well, I'll remember the Samson Okunlola recruitment last week. Francis Mauangoa as well, another IMG product. Ends up going to Miami. So there was a chance there, of course, I think, to put some higher-level talent there at the offensive line position where Florida needs some help. Had a good offensive line this past cycle. You got 2 offensive line coaches, Osiris Torrance, raking in awards. There should be plenty to sell there. But there, kind of just to summarize. Outside the top 10 in overall recruiting, the thing that hurts about that, you're 5th in the SEC, 7th if you want to count Texas and OU. But man, there was a lot of potential in this class. Florida ends up out of the top 10.
Want more Gators Breakdown? Join Gators Breakdown Plus. Starting at $3 a month. Get access to unique episodes, plus a blog, chat room, giveaways, shout-outs, and more. Gators Breakdown Plus is furthering the interaction with fans and listeners like you. Head to gatorsbreakdown.supportingcast.fm to join Gators Breakdown Plus today.